would like to call this May 7th, 2020 regular Board of Education meeting of the Strongsville City School Board to order. Mr. Anagnostou, would you please take the roll?
Sure. Mrs. Bissell?
Here.
Mr. Grozan?
Mr. Grozan had a prior commitment and is not in attendance today.
Mr. Micko?
Here?
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mrs. Hausen?
Here.
4 present.
Would you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next section of our agenda is our district goals. Our district goals are academic achievement and growth, financial prudence, and community engagement. And each of these goals will be challenged by the issues we have to deal with today, but we will work through them and use them as our guideposts. Next is public comment. I don't have my laptop open. Do you?
I do.
So we have 2 public comments that were submitted. The first is from Kevin Joniak. Says, today's directives from Governor DeWine eased in-person restrictions. Since our commencement is scheduled to be held after the date of the restrictions lifting, is there room in our plan for a change in format? Thank you.
So I think for a lot of people, our graduation plans are a source of interest, to put it kindly. I do want to make a few comments for myself, and then we'll open it up for information sharing. As far as graduation is concerned, and I think this is true of a couple of issues that we've been dealing with in the past couple of weeks. I'm going to get it started by saying we could have communicated better. And you know, for that, I apologize. We apologize. Whatever the excuse is, we didn't communicate well. We understand that. I ask, please forgive us, and we will try to do better. And that's what I would ask of anyone. We apologize. Please forgive us. We'll try to do better. Everyone here realizes that graduation is very important, and all of us want to celebrate and recognize our seniors' accomplishments. That's a given, but I want to make sure we said that out loud. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are trying to balance a bunch of requirements that cannot be balanced. You know, on the one hand, we have parents and students who want to have their achievements recognized, and they deserve to have them recognized, and they want to do that in as close to a regular graduation ceremony as possible. We also have parents who are concerned about the coronavirus and have understandable concerns about spreading that disease and unintended consequences. And it's difficult, if not impossible, to balance. We're trying to balance making sure that each student gets the recognition they deserve, and also just the logistics of 470 students. And if we tried to recognize them and balance that with the requirements that the County Board of Health has, we cannot balance it. If we recognize them for 10 minutes each, you know, that's close to a 78-hour ceremony. We cannot balance it. We're doing the best we can. With that said, I think it's important to recognize that we need to do 2 things. One, we need to do something now, and we're planning that, and we're trying to do it as well as we can to honor those students as well as we can. And at the same time, we're committed to doing a ceremony to recognize their accomplishments properly in a public session when we can, and we don't know when that is. I would love to be able to say it's going to be in July. I'd love to say it's in August. I or no one, I think, can say when that will be. But as a board, as an administration, as a high school team, we're committed to doing that when we can. If it's 2 years from now and it's just my daughter and Laura's daughter and Cole Joniak, we will have that ceremony and enjoy it and celebrate the accomplishments of our students. The last thing I'm going to ask for is, I think the only way we're going to get through this well is with patience, with kindness, and compassion. And so in all of these situations, whether it's the graduation ceremony, whether it's any of the other recognitions that we're doing for the end of the year, kindergarten graduation is a tradition of ours, 8th grade, et cetera. Those are all traditions. Please be patient, please be kind, please be compassionate. And if there are questions, if we're dropping the ball or we're not aware of it, reach out to us and have a positive conversation. Nobody to a person has any malicious intent. It is a stressful time, and we will get through it together. With that said, are there any other comments? Or I was going to turn it over to Cameron if you have any specific comments as far as where we're at today with the graduation ceremony.
Sure. Any board members have any other comments before I? So I appreciate, Mr. Micko, what you shared, and I think that's the important part for all of us to remember, is that we've got a tremendous amount of people that are working tirelessly to make sure that our events for our seniors and all of our kids are the best that they possibly can be. And so if we always assume positive intent, we start in a good framework. And so that's where we're at. We understand that we're in a pandemic, and we cannot recreate as much as we want to what a traditional ceremony would be. So what we've done as a district is I have some of my colleagues that are liaisons to the level. So Erin Green, our Director of Curriculum, she's working directly with the elementary principals and preschool to look at what are all the special end-of-year events, ceremonies, awards that are there that we think we can recreate in a virtual situation or a socially distanced situation, and they're working through the nuances of those. And I think I saw some of our principals start communicating what 5th grade promotion or celebration is going to look like. Dan Faust, our communications coordinator, is working with the middle school and looking at those events to see how we can culminate the school year. Jenny has been working with the high school team, and yes, it's been a difficult week for the high school team, but as I'm the person, and Jenny's the person that works with them personally, they have put their heart and soul into doing what's best for the kids, and we understand that not everybody is going to agree with our plan. I live in another school district, and they're doing the plan that many people would hope that we would, and that superintendent is getting just as many complaints or criticisms about that plan. It's just the nature of what it is, and we're going to continue to do what's best for our kids and our community. So in terms of the big senior events, Mr. Collins, our senior class advisor, had a series of virtual conversations with our seniors today. We've been communicating with them so that they're aware. But as we've shared in various communications, we started with an idea of smaller sizes. I know I've been shared the Air Force video numerous times about a socially distanced ceremony with smaller groups of people. Not that our ceremony or our idea completely mimicked that, but that was the idea, that we could have smaller groups of students organized by alphabet groups to recognize them with their families in the stadium in a way that we thought can comply with the requirements that the state put out. And as I've shared numerous times, we contacted the Board of Health, and they said absolutely not. Even if you socially distance, if you have more than 10 people out of the vehicle or in a space, even if they're 6 feet apart, it's not going to be approved. And so that's where we went back to the drawing board. And I know when you take a look at our ceremony, and I shared it in an email update with our families and our seniors last night, what we are looking at, if you take as much of the traditional commencement ceremony is there, a student is going to have their name read over the speaker. They are going to move across and get their diploma cover like they always would. They are going to get a photo taken that we'll be able to give to the parents. They will be, there'll be a videographer there, Mr. Benson will be there to videotape it, and then they will return to their vehicle. And then we will take all of this footage, we'll take the speeches, we'll take the graduates crossing and getting their diploma, and we'll take all of that and put that together in one comprehensive video and stream that at a later date. We also said, and I just want to reiterate what Richard said, we are committed to having an in-person commencement ceremony for the class of 2020 when we can and how we can. So what we're trying to do is to take a look at all aspects and look at what we can recreate and still say that even on May 31st when we have our ceremonies, we're going to If it's June, July, August, whatever it is, we're still going to provide a ceremony when we're allowed. In terms of Mr. Joniak's question about the restrictions for the restaurants, it's been difficult to find anything that's been put out publicly that expands or reduces the restrictions to anything else but restaurants. A lot of the same information, if you saw the governor shared of, here's what the requirements are for office areas or manufacturing. They put out another sheet like that for restaurants, but there's not been anything to be stated in relation to this. But we'll keep our eye on it, and if there's things that change, as we've changed our plan multiple times already, we will continue to change our plans. And everybody needs to know our goal is to have an in-person ceremony as well in whatever framework we can with the restrictions that are in place. I know one of the questions that I've received frequently with our ceremony, since our ceremony, like most others, is a drive-up ceremony, is can parents get out of the car? Can they see their child, or can they be in a position where they can see their child get their diploma, hear their name read? We are doing everything we can to make that happen. We're having a logistics meeting tomorrow with the high school. As long as we can keep the number in the area where we're having it under 10, it's my goal to afford parents that option. It's not going to be everybody because there has to be limits, but afford parents that option to see their child graduate in a very unique situation. So when we take a look at all of the options out there, I hope people will see our sincere effort to do what's in the best interest of our kids. As Mr. Micko said, we have families that have reached out to us that said, please don't do anything. Please have a virtual ceremony for us. So we're trying to meet all of those needs. And between the plans that are out there, the only difference between our plan and some other plans is we're not having students walk across the stage. And as Richard said, part of that is timing. We're not worried about spending 5 days doing something. That's not the issue. But the way we're set up, it would take a significant amount of time. We would have to take a look at disinfecting door handles, disinfecting railings, things of that nature. So the outside of event, it was an evolution from our first idea, addresses a lot of the concerns of an indoor event, and helps provide the most that we possibly can for our seniors in this environment. In terms of, I know the question wasn't about this, but in terms of prom, that's another big topic for our seniors. I spoke to the high school earlier today. I think everybody is aware, but just we will officially communicate that the prom, I believe it was May 22nd, is officially canceled for that date. We still have our backup date of June that we're holding. They are working on plans to do a virtual prom with all the students. So same idea as commencement. They're working on alternative options for prom. They have backup dates for an in-person prom, and they're going to look at holding those backup dates as long as we possibly can until it gets to the point where it's just too late. Kids have gone. Hopefully kids can go into the workforce or military or college, but we're going to continue to hold those dates as long as we possibly can. So just again, reverting back to the question, we will continue to get guidance from the Cuyahoga County Board of Health. We'll continue to look for guidance from the state. And if restrictions are reduced, we will change our plans accordingly, if possible, in the time that's allotted.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
With the current plan that we have for outdoors, can you speak to what we would do in inclement weather?
We are going to go through that. What I've asked is that the plan be able to be replicated in a variety of locations. So I can't speak to that directly because that's on our list for tomorrow to finalize what our contingency plans are with weather. So I'll have more to share in the future. Mr. Micko, we had one more, and it was from Cynthia. And it states, our family is wondering about reimbursement for kindergarten. Will we be reimbursed for the months the full day kids missed?
And that is on our agenda to discuss. And did you want to tee that up, or do you just want to say, wait till we get to it on our agenda?
Well, it's actually, because I have a full-day kindergartner myself.
Oh, it is, you're right. So it is on our agenda to discuss, and we will, we understand that we have to address that and we will address that, and it's on our agenda, so just be patient, to be decided.
And those are all the public comments.
Do you want me to check if there's anyone outside?
Please. And while you're doing that, I will just announce that, for the entire board, public comment is important to us. And we tried during our virtual meetings to do the best we could as far as the spirit of public comment. Now that we're back in person, we still want to afford people the opportunity for that public comment. But again, we have to balance unbalanced needs. So public comment is one person at a time. To make sure that we stay in our groups of 10. And nobody decided to visit us, which I will take as a sign of that the virtual public comment is working. That completes public comment, and we now move to Treasurer's report. Mr. Anagnostou.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. Before I get into my items on the agenda, I wanted to address the board and the community about the budget reductions that were announced by the governor earlier this week and how it impacts Strongsville City Schools. As noted and reported earlier this week, the governor announced $775 million in budget reductions of the state operating budget for this fiscal year, which is July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2020. Of the $775 million, $300 million was for the school foundation funding formula, and $55 million in other educational items. The $300 million reduction in total state funding represents about 3.7% of the total funding for school foundation funding. However, the reductions were not applied equally across the board, meaning school districts received a reduction above 3.7% and others received a reduction below 3.7%. Strongsville received a reduction of 17% reduction, or $1.6 million of our $9.1 million of state foundation funding for this school year. The reduction will occur in the next 2 months of the fiscal year, which is May and June. However, since the reduction is more than the state currently owes us during this period of time, we will need to essentially cut a check to the state, or they will reduce the difference from next year's foundation amounts. It's not exactly clear the methodology that the state used for the reductions. However, the districts, from what was shared, the districts were bucketed into 6 different quintiles by wealth, and a per pupil reduction was applied. The other benchmark that was used, what is the impact to a district's total budget based on fiscal year 19 actual expenditures, which ranged between 0.5% to 3%. For Strongsville, the impact was 2.21% of our fiscal year 19 expenditures. Reductions for next fiscal year beginning July 1 are still unknown at this point. At the May 21st board meeting, legally I will need to present the 5-year forecast, which may include multiple assumptions and scenarios and what-if situations due to estimated state funding reductions and impact of property tax collections. That's all I have with the budget reduction. Mr. Miko, if you had anything.
We have been thinking about this for quite a while now. We knew that with the economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic, we knew that there were going to be negative consequences. We found out earlier in the week that Strongsville will have some extreme negative consequences. We're going to work through them and do the best we can for our students and our taxpayers. We are in, it almost becomes trite to say we are in unprecedented times. The good news is because financial prudence has always been a goal of ours and a benchmark of ours, we are in a position that we have tools available to deal with this. Finding out, the governor, I listened to him very closely during all of his press conferences for the past week, and he's talked about how the school districts and other public entities need predictability. So I'm taking him at his word that if there are cuts for the last 2 months of this fiscal year, I'm assuming there will be cuts for the next fiscal year, and we will weather this storm as well as we can. But I've been sharing with my fellow board members, we've been discussing this. We do need to plan on it, but it is better that we plan today. You know, it sounds almost childish, but it is easier to cut $10 over 2 years than it is to cut $20 at once. So we will be financially prudent, and we will work through those decisions. You know, although we have these cuts, we still have not found out about how the CARES Act is going to affect us. There is discussion about some of those funds. So we need to make those decisions and work through them and do what's best, like I said, for our students and our taxpayers. Anyone else have any other questions or comments?
Mr. Mitchell, I could actually share the CARES Act amount. So the state did release allocations. Strong's will receive about $371,000. And that's all they've given notice so far is the allocation. With these types of funds, there's an application process with the federal funds and how you're going to use those within a certain parameters. That application and the parameters are yet to be released by the Ohio Department of Education, and it should be within the next 2 weeks from what they've told us today. Moving on with the agenda, item A, student fees for the secondary, which is the middle school and the high school. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that a credit reimbursement be issued for unused course materials and parking permits due to the COVID-19 school closure as set forth in the exhibit, which can be found in Exhibit A.
Do I have a motion? Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? George, would you take the roll?
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mr. Micko.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item B, field trip and other academic club activities. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that a credit reimbursement be issued for the cancellation of any field trip and student activity events due to the COVID-19 school closure.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? No. We will have some discussion and comment at the last one, but let's go through these and then we can talk about them.
Call the roll.
Please take the roll.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mr. Micko.
Yes.
C, pay to participate in trainer fee for spring sports. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that a credit reimbursement be issued for student athlete pay to participate fees and trainer fees when applicable as a result of the cancellation of spring sports season due to the COVID-19 school closure.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Trying to keep me on my toes. Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Mr. Roberts. Any discussion?
The one thing I'll add, when I said the trainer fees when applicable, it's only if a student athlete, the spring sport was their only sport. With trainer fees, it's a one-time fee which covers you for all your sports. So if you played a fall or winter sport and already pay the trainer fee, that's not reimbursable. It's only if your first sport of the year is a spring sport.
So what we will discuss is that, all of these, we had been discussing a framework and a rationale. We started with if there were fees that, because we didn't have the class, we didn't have the sport, we didn't have the activity, it would not be appropriate or proper for us to keep those fees. So then we had some discussion on making sure that we treat all of these with the same methodology. And George, you want to discuss a little bit about how we came to some of the conclusions on those fees?
Yeah, so with the secondary fees, we looked at exactly what you said, what wasn't used. So starting at the middle school, there are some courses that are semester course, an annual course, and a quarter course. For the quarter course, such as PE, and some of the art class, I think sixth grade, and other courses, they paid for the fee at the beginning of the year, and they never had the class because fourth quarter, school was canceled due to the closure before the fourth quarter. Other fees at the secondary, they're lab fees, and a lot of the labs take place after the testing, which is in the fourth quarter. So we worked with the teachers to see what percentage of what was paid, of what the students paid for the materials, what was used by the students prior to the shutdown and what was planned to be used after the shutdown, and got a percentage of those fees, which was applied in the exhibit, Exhibit A for item A. The field trip and other club activities, it was for field trips that were planned. Students pay for the cost of the field trips, and it flows through an account. We were able to cancel all the field trips and no costs were incurred, so it's refunding any field trips for those amounts, and it's at all levels, from the elementary level to the secondary, and any other academic club activities such as the DECA. DECA had states the week of, I think, the closure, and however, that one was actually paid for before because it was happening that week, but the Ohio State DECA is reimbursing the school districts, and that will be passed down to the students as well. And then the pay to participate, that was for the spring sports, 2 weeks into the sports, and then it was canceled. So, for the sports, some sports collected, others did not, so it'd be just, the ones that didn't, just be waiving, and then the ones that did, we credit back to the student's account. And then, although we're still on item C, we haven't voted for it. Should I jump to D for the preschool, Mr. Miko?
I
Just talk about the
was
methodology.
going to say, I wanted to deal with all the fees, and then the preschool, same framework,
Okay.
but it's a slightly different topic.
Okay.
Mr. Rico, can I ask a question quick?
Of
Just
course,
real quick. I
this is
wanted to
discussion.
Double check that we're crediting these back to the children's pay school accounts.
So they'll be credited so I'll just go over the whole process.
Okay.
So it'll be credited to their Power School
Power
account.
school, thank you.
So our first priority is the graduating seniors. That's going to be our immediate focus because they're at the end now and with graduation. So first we'll apply the items as a credit to the student's fee account, which is in Power Schools. And if the student has any outstanding fees, then the credit will be applied against those fees. If there's still a credit balance, we will look to see if a student has any siblings with an outstanding balance, and if so, the credit will be applied against the sibling's outstanding balance. If there's still a credit balance, the credit will be carried forward with a sibling to next year and applied to next year's fees. If a student is a senior and has a credit balance with no younger siblings, then the family can apply for a refund up to a time frame. We'll put a sunset on it, whether 6 months is a good number, or we can determine what a good estimate is after we finalize all the credits. The same process will apply for non-seniors, as the credits will be applied against any outstanding fees for the students or any siblings. If there is still a credit balance, the credit will be carried into next school year and subsequent years and applied against the next year's fees. If a family does not wish to carry forward their credit balance, the family can apply for a refund. Once all the credits are applied, the Treasurer's Office will send communication to notify the families. At that point, the Treasurer's Office will post a request to refund form on the website. That form will need to be completed along with payment instructions such as ACH or a proper mailing address for the check, and submitted to the Treasurer's Office. And then lastly, we would request patience, as this is a manual process and it's going to take us some time. Additionally, for the high school, final credits will not be applied until all the book collection periods are complete. For the seniors, which is May 15th, and for the underclassmen is May 26th and May 27th. So the one thing we ask, just bear patience. It can be a manual process, and we weren't able to start it yet because the board hasn't approved them, and once we start it, they're live in the account. So it's going to be it'll take us time, but once they're in, we'll send communication notifying everyone that they're in. You can check your Power Schools account, and then if you don't wish to carry it forward, you can fill out the form to our office and we'll process the refund. So, and the same thing goes for, although this doesn't need board approval, same thing goes for the cafeteria accounts. If you have a balance in your cafeteria account, this happens every year, so it's not related specifically to the COVID. So if you end the school year with a balance in your cafeteria account, it doesn't go away, it gets carried on to next year. And the process remains the same for the seniors. If they ask the district, we'll credit that money back. And And the cafeteria also looks at siblings as well.
Any other questions? Do you still have to take the roll for
We have
this
to take the
final
roll
one?
on C.
Right.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
and Mr. Miko.
Yes.
Motion passes. And lastly, preschool tuition. Due to the COVID-19 school closure, the collection of preschool tuition payments for the months of April 2020, which were due March 20th, and May 2020, which were due April 20th, have been suspended. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the suspended monthly tuition of $140 for the month of April 2020 be waived. Be it further resolved that the suspended monthly tuition of $140 for the month of May 2020 be reinstated and added to the student's fee account as remote learning and engagement has been provided. So what we did with the preschool tuition, we looked at the remaining months. There's 2 months remaining. There was engagement and instruction provided. Was it the same as they were in school? No. We looked at the amount of time and and we benchmarked it. Since they received the instruction, 2 months left, we thought it was fair that we waive 1 month, and since the service was provided, we have the other month, so it's of the remaining balance of $280, that 50% of it be waived. And overall, the payment is paid over 9 months, waiving 1/9 of it is 11%.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any other discussion? Just, again, I want to highlight our idea was to be reasonable, to be fair, and to have a consistent methodology or a consistent way of determining whether fees should be refunded or not. And I think we did as good a job as you can with a slightly inexact science. Any other discussion? George, take the roll.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
and Mr. Miko.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0. And then lastly, as you'll notice about the full-day kindergarten tuition, that will be coming from the recommendation of the superintendent, since I have appearance of a conflict with having a full-day kindergartner. And that concludes my report.
Any other questions for George? Dr. Ryba, you are up.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. Before I get to the items on the agenda, just a few general updates that I'd like to share with the board and our community. First of all, I just want to share my sincere appreciation for everybody's understanding and patience and collaboration as we work through remote learning and what that's been the last X amount of weeks in our district, and we have 3 more weeks to go. And so, throughout this process, we've learned a lot. We've seen what's worked. We've seen areas that we've needed to enhance, and we've enhanced those as we've gone. And then we're also starting to look long-term as to where we need to continue to grow to provide remote learning services for our students when we start to take a look at what may be the reality for schooling for the 2020-21 school year. So I just did want to share, I'll share this all in an email with our parents probably tomorrow or Saturday. But I did want to let everybody know that we are sticking with our scheduled district calendar, which means school will go through May 29th. That's our last day of school through our calendar. And as I've shared a couple times with various groups, per the state, we have minimum school hours that we have to meet. None of those hours were waived by the state. We still have to meet those requirements. And although we have additional hours to use at the high school level and middle school level, at the preschool and kindergarten level, we don't have those extra hours and we need to attend. And so we felt it was in our best interest for our families and for our students that we attend through the rest of the school year. However, one of the things that I will share is the last week of remote learning will be a little different. It will be lighter. It will be at the discretion of the parents. May 22nd is really the last week, or Friday, that week of, if I'm doing my math right, that would be May 22nd is the Friday, so I can't, whatever that Monday is before May 22nd, I can't do it in my head right now. The 18th, thank you, Jenny. May 18th, that will be the last week where there will be the requirement of submitting work. Teachers will provide feedback on that work. that's due at the end of the week. But the week of May 26th, we'll still have remote learning plans out on the web as we have in the past. For the elementary, they'll probably look a little different than the tic-tac-toe boards. But we're going to provide suggestions, some fun activities to wrap up, maybe some ideas to do throughout the summertime. We've gotten a lot of feedback that, especially at the elementary level, are you going to keep the tic-tac-toe boards up for people to see or utilize? And yes, we are. So nothing that we assign the week of the 26th is going to be required to be submitted or turned in. It's more just to share some end-of-the-year wrap-up activities for the specific courses for kids to do. And so that will take us through the 29th. The teachers will still be available for office hours if there's a need for students to do that, or for teachers to do that. So we ask that you request email. Some of them are setting up appointments to still do that. One of the things that's upcoming next week and throughout the next few weeks is clean out of the buildings for the summer. So starting on Monday and Tuesday, we will have at different times staff returning to clean out their rooms. At the elementary level, we're taking the students' belongings and bagging them up and labeling them so families, when it's their turn, based on their grade level and alphabet, could just grab their bag and exit the building. And we'll have specific pathways for folks to follow, and we'll be sharing all of that guidance here shortly. But please be on the lookout from your principal. He or she is sending the email updates detailing the days and times for pickup. And the high school and middle school will have different opportunities, and students will come and clean out their locker. So we will be working on that. I did want to make sure everybody's aware that one of the things I'll also be sending out is we have developed safe work protocols for our employees and our board members, but we've also set up protocols for our visitors. So the one thing that's important as you start to plan to come to pick up belongings, any visitor that's coming to Strongsville City Schools will have to wear a facial covering when entering the buildings. So please be ready and have that available, because if you do not have a facial covering, you will not be able to enter the building. And that goes for any visitors, as I said, and we'll share that in an email. The last thing that I want to mention is obviously there's a lot of uncertainty about what next school year will look like. There's uncertainty for those of us that work in education, and there's definitely uncertainty for families and parents and students. I'm on weekly conference calls with superintendents across the state and different leadership groups, as I know George and Jenny and a lot of our administrators are. And what we're hoping and what we're being told is in the near future, the Ohio Department of Health and the Ohio Department of Education are going to share some parameters as to what school districts or guardrails, whatever you want to call them, that school districts may need to live under for the start of the 2020-21 school year. Once we get those parameters, if we don't get them in the near future, we're going to move forward and start planning based on what we feel is in the best interest of our kids and staff and what we feel will be there. But we're hoping to in the next week or so to get those. And then we've developed a system in terms of work groups at each level. So we'll have a preschool work group, we'll have an elementary work group, a middle school, and a high school. And under those work groups, there's a variety of topics that they need to address. But they will start looking at what does educational programming look like if we have to socially distance. I know Cleveland.com had an article out there about 2-day rotations or green-white days for, what we use at the middle school or something of that nature. At this time, everybody's just trying to guess as to what we may need to do. But we do have a plan in place to develop that. It will be a group comprised of a cross-section of staff and parents. And so we'll be working on that, and we hope to have those groups solidified before the end of May. And most importantly today, I had a virtual meeting with my student advisory group. So, I've spent a lot the last, however long it's been, month and a half, 2 months, talking a lot to adults and hearing the feedback of adults. And although it's a small group of 2 students from 6th grade on up to 12th grade, it was wonderful to get their feedback as to what's working, what's not working, and what their suggestions were to improve. So Mr. Faust and I were on the virtual meeting with them today, and we took those notes down. And the good news is that our students are appreciative and had a good feel overall for what we're doing, but had some good pointed feedback about how we can make it better moving forward, which we will. So then moving on to the agenda items, unless there's any questions on the topics I just brought up there. All right. As with George, all of my topics under my report are resolutions related to the closure that we either need to suspend board policy and adopt new rules for this closure, or just adopt procedures that need to be implemented for the closure. So as I say that, the first one is a little outside of all the closures. This is just a one that we have to approve in a certain time frame from the state. So that has to do with paper testing for third graders. So the state gave an option a few years ago to move to paper testing instead of computer-based testing for third grade only. We'd done computer-based testing for a while. Based on our feedback from our teachers, they saw computer-based testing as an impediment to our students truly demonstrating what they know, because they were worried about managing technology and dragging and dropping and doing all of that versus just what is the content that they have to master. So this past year, or what would have been, we went to paper testing for reading, and we're suggesting to go to paper testing for both reading and math for third graders should we have testing next year. So be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that grade 3 Ohio State tests in English language arts and mathematics shall be administered in paper format for the 2020-21 school year pursuant to Ohio Revised Code section 3301.0711 as amended by Senate Bill 216 as stated in the Exhibit B. Moving on to now the resolutions that all deal with our closure. Be it resolved, the first one is the resolution authorizing implementation of a plan for distance learning. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent per the authority provided by House Bill 197, Strongsville City School District will implement distance learning retroactive to March 16, 2020 and continuing through the period of the extended closure due to COVID-19 as set forth in Exhibit C.
Do I have a motion? Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? Take the roll.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Moving on to item 3. Item 3 is an adjustment to our current board policy in terms of how we report progress. I've shared with parents that for preschool and elementary students, there will be no trimester 3 reporting. For the middle school, there would just be third quarter reporting and nothing for fourth quarter. And for the high school, we will combine everything into an 18-week semester grade, which will be 100% based on what students accomplished up until March 12th. And as we've shared multiple times, based on a student's grade on March 12th, the grade will either stay the same or get better. Based on the distance learning procedures we've set in place, the student's grade will not decline in any way. We have a policy that specifically states we're going to report progress quarterly. We're not doing that, and so we need to adjust that based on your consideration. So be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that grading and reporting procedures as stipulated in board policies 5420 and 5421 will be suspended for the period of March 16th through May 29th, 2020, and the district will follow the procedures outlined in Exhibit A, previously listed in item 7A2. Moving on to the next board policy, this is graduation requirements. So a part of House Bill 197, the state said if a student prior to the closure demonstrated that they were on track for graduation, we could still have the student graduate because of state testing and other requirements being suspended. So the procedure that we came up with for Strongsville High School is that you have to meet our course requirement that's in the board policy. You have to take the specific courses by graduation, which we said what you had to take, because all students had the opportunity to do that prior to the closure, and you had to earn 22 credit hours, which is also in our board policy, because all students had the opportunity to participate in 22 credit hours prior to the closure. So be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that per the authority provided by House Bill 197, students enrolled in 12th grade during the 1920 school year at Strongsville High School shall earn a high school diploma with the successful completion of all required courses and credit hours per board policy 5460 and show adequate completion of required remote learning work from April 20th through May 29th, 2020. Graduation requirements as stated in board policy 5460 outside of the required courses and credit hours shall not apply to students enrolled in 12th grade in the 2019-20 school year. Continuing on, the other thing that we have to address is how are we going to deal with evaluations? And so as in item 5, be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the board designates the completion of the 2019-20 teacher and counselor evaluations to be impractical and/or impossible due to the COVID-19 pandemic pursuant to House Bill 197 as set forth in Exhibit D.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? I will just, for the public's sake, communicate that I look at this as following the same procedures we followed with the students, et cetera. It is impractical to try to grade them in remote learning. It is impractical to try to use our tools as far as teacher evaluation is concerned. But, I will say the same way we expect our students to do their best and to continue learning, the same is true for our teachers, et cetera. We know and expect that they continue to do their best and continue getting better at what we do.
And Mr. Micko, before you take the vote, if I could just add, the area that creates it to be impractical or impossible for a lot of scenarios is the teacher evaluation system is 50% based on student growth. And so because we don't have access to some of that student growth, that's a real challenge for finalizing evaluations as well.
Any other questions? Would you take the roll?
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Micko?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Number 6 is dealing with evaluations for leadership and administrators in our district. So be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that certain leadership team and administrator evaluations be suspended for the 1920 school contract year due to the COVID-19 pandemic pursuant to House Bill 197 as set forth in the Exhibit E.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Hausum by a hair. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second to Mr. Roberts. Any discussion? Again, this continues the same theme. It is impractical for us to evaluate in our current remote environment. Mr. Anagnostou.
Yep. Mr. Roberts? Or I'm sorry, Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Now Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Micko?
Yes.
Motion passes.
And then I'm going to jump in on number 7. This is on the agenda. It's full-day kindergarten tuition reimbursement. We're going to table that. It is very important to us that all of our votes follow proper parliamentary procedure because we don't want anyone coming back and invalidating them. And we just got to make sure that everybody is allowed to vote and can vote, so we're just going to table it. I will say that as far as full-day kindergarten tuition reimbursement is concerned, we're going to apply the same rubric or design that we've applied with all of our other reimbursements, but we need to double-check that we do this properly, and we'll bring it back on the next agenda in May
21st.
21st. Thank you. Any questions? So that one is tabled. Cameron?
That concludes my portion of it. I'm going to turn it over to our Assistant Superintendent, Jenny Pelko, for the Human Resource Report.
Thank you, Dr. Ryba. Good evening, everybody. Under Human Resources, I have the following items for your consideration. Under B1, we have the resignation of a non-certificated staff member. Under B2, appointments for certificated staff members. An appointment for a certificated supplemental contract. Under B3, we have the appointment of a certificated supplemental contract prorated, and this one does require a vote.
Number 3, be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, Melissa Kelly be hired as head football cheerleading coach for the 2020-2021 school year based upon receipt of clear FBI, BCI background check, fundamentals of coaching, concussion certificate, etc. Be it further resolved that this limited contract be non-renewed for the 2021-2022 school year, and that to comply with Ohio Revised Code, the required written notification to non-renew be included in the limited contract. Salary to be prorated. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
No.
Mr. Roberts,
No.
Mrs. Bissell,
No.
Mr. Miko.
No.
Motion does not pass.
With that, that concludes the superintendent's report.
With regard to the appointments, I do want to make a few comments and questions. Mr. Coach Sapara is not here with us because we're at our limit, but we're excited to have him on board for the basketball coach, and we look forward to welcoming him and recognizing him when we can at a future date. But there are a couple of new appointments and new hires, and I just wanted to discuss with the community that we recognize that we got some bad news, financial news, this week, and that we have a 1.6 million cut coming down the road, et cetera. If we were a private industry, they would probably call it a hiring freeze or what have you. But I do want to communicate to the public that, you know, we have a temporary, I don't want to call it a temporary hiring freeze. We kept these appointments on the agenda because they were in process. We made offers to these people, and we want to make sure we honor that and continue to have that good reputation that when we make an offer, we consider it and continue it. But it would be impractical or inappropriate for us not to acknowledge that we do have some serious financial issues that we're going to have to work through. And while we're working through that, we will have, you know, temporary on hold for that new hiring while we figure out what we're going to do. At the end of the day, we're a school. Our biggest resource, our biggest asset, our biggest expense is the people in that school. And so it's only prudent that we take a pause on that, work through it, and do what's in the best interest of our students. Any other comments or questions on that issue? Hearing none, consent calendar. Action by the Board of Education and adoption of the consent calendar at this point of the agenda means that all items appearing in this agenda with asterisks, which items constitute the consent calendar, are adopted by one single motion unless a member of the board or the superintendent requests otherwise. We did table the full-day kindergarten vote. I don't believe there were any corrections. Are there any requests? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? Take the roll.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Board of Education, other. Why don't we start with Michelle?
I don't have anything today.
Laura?
Nothing to report.
Seth?
I'm just happy to see everybody.
It is good to be back in person. It goes without saying that we are in interesting times. We all have our families, we all have our roles, but we appreciate everybody and coming together and working through these the challenges that we're going to face. We'll work through them well. You know, we're all watching what the city's going through. We know that obviously they have their challenges, and we're following that, and we're going to work together with the city and ourselves. You know, I will share, like everything else, we're working and making the decisions and making the best decisions we can with the information we have. You know, we've all heard the governor talk about distancing when school comes back and splitting days, et cetera. None of us know how that's going to work out right now. None of us know what is ultimately going to be decided. What we can share with you as a board and as an administrative team that will work through those decisions. We'll make the best decisions we can and do what we can to continue educating the students of Strongsville now and well into the future. But we do have a lot on our plate right now, as I'm sure we all do personally and in the schools. So let's all work together, and like I said, with patience, kindness, and compassion, we will get through this. I will say I'm thrilled that the governor is allowing barbers to get back to work in the next 2 or 3 weeks. I will be first in line. Any other comments? Hearing none. We do have reason for executive session. Do you have our list?
I do. To consider the employment of a public employee or official, to consider the investigation of complaints against a public employee, to confer with an attorney for the Board of Education concerning disputes involving the board that are subject to pending or imminent court action, to prepare for and review negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees, and to consider matters required to be kept confidential by federal law or regulations or state statutes.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? Hearing none, would you take the roll?
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes. We will enter into executive session at 7:58. We have no reason to have any public meeting afterwards. Please, everyone, I've been saying this at work, and I'll say it publicly, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay sane. And I think number 3 might be the hardest one right now. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And I can't do it yet. I just wanted to. Have a good evening. Thank you very much.